welcome everybody. Welcome to another edition of Mondays with Mark. I'm here today with Nick Savarese from the Douglas J. Flutie Jr. Foundation, who's the executive director. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks, Mark. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I thought maybe today that we would spend some time talking about Doug J. Flutie Jr. Foundation and your role and what the foundation does. And I can obviously share with you our us being the recipients of some incredible generosity from the foundation. So I guess without further ado, Nick, if you want to mind talking a little bit to our community about the foundation and your role and all that and its impact on the community.
Sure. So we were founded about 22 years ago, 23 years ago by Doug and Lori Flutie. Doug Flutie, many people know here, particularly in the Boston area. Doug won the Heisman Trophy at Boston College as the best college football player in the country, and went on to a long and successful NFL career. Professional football career, both in the NFL and the Canadian Football League. Played for, I think, like 20 years. Played until he was about 42, 43 years old professionally. Ended his career with the New England Patriots, and had a son, Doug Jr., who is Dougie Jr. right now. Is probably about 28 or 29 years old. And so when Dougie was diagnosed with autism, shortly after he was diagnosed with autism, he was diagnosed at 2.5, 3 years old, something along there. And a few years later, Doug and Lori decided, we're going to give back to the autism community, families who are sort of facing similar challenges. Really, the impetus was, back then, 22 years ago, while there's still a void of services now, of course, there always has been, but there's so much more services for people and families affected by autism now than there was back then. And they were sort of at the very beginning of that saying to themselves, like, they couldn't find services for Dougie. And they thought to themselves, wow, we have some notoriety, some fame. Like, Doug could probably just call the governor at that time and said, hey, pick up the phone. They had means, and they couldn't find services. So they really thought, well, what about all these other families who don't have the connections and, that we have? How are they coping? And so that's really the impetus for the foundation. It was just to help families affected by autism navigate their life, get financial support, that sort of thing. And that's what we've been doing for 22, 23 years now, which is essentially really started with just providing direct financial support to families. So if a family has a child with autism and can't afford swim lessons, if a family has a child with autism and needs therapy or whatever, can't afford it, that's really the impetus for how it started. And we've really pretty much stuck true to that for 22, 23 years. Basically, direct financial support to families in need, and then grants, community partnerships with organizations that are serving people with autism. That's basically the gist of it, and that's what we've been doing this whole time.
Wow, that's a great description, and clearly we owe the Fluties an incredible amount of gratitude for their role in terms of spearheading lots of things in the autism community. How about yourself, Nick? Tell us a little bit about your role with the Flutie Foundation and how long you've been around doing that. Sure. And all the fun things that go with it.
No. So I've been with the Flutie Foundation for a little over 3 years now. I spent my entire career in sort of the field of serving people with disabilities. And I taught special ed for a little bit, worked at Special Olympics for a long time, did job development for people with disabilities. When I lived in Colorado 15, 16 years ago and started a little community organization there called Sky's the Limit, which was like social and recreational opportunities for kids with developmental intellectual disabilities, autism, that sort of stuff. Anyways, started the Flutie Foundation about 3.5 years ago. And, my role as the executive director is essentially to, help the organization grow, a lot of fundraising, primarily we're essentially a fundraising organization. We're built on the brand of Doug Flutie and his family. And he essentially, decided I'm going to start fundraising using his name and brand and, reputation to bring his friends together, do golf tournaments, do this sort of stuff. And obviously over time we've evolved into, well, I'd like to think a little, sophisticated fundraising organization, but, at times, who knows? But either way, we kind of see ourselves, there's a lot of smaller organizations who might not have the brand name or the reach that we have. And so we help, raise funds and disseminate, create partnerships with nonprofits or schools like yourself. And then obviously we have direct financial support to families. So anyways, a lot of fundraising. I look at my job as three things, basically: decisions, vision, and revenue, right? So, but really just trying to find the best ways to serve the autism community and help as many people as we possibly can.
That's great. Thank you for that description, Nick.
Sure.
What are some of the biggest highlights in terms of your role and with the Flutie Foundation, and maybe some of the biggest challenges right now?
Yeah, so those are good questions. I would say I'm really proud of our team and our community and all our donors who really kind of stuck with us over the last, the pandemic year, basically. What's it, the last 13, 14 months or whatever it was. I remember when it first hit thinking, we're heavy on events. We do a lot of, big fundraising events and this sort of stuff. And so I remember when the pandemic first hit, nervously talking to the board chair on the phone saying, I don't know, man, we might be looking at, who knows what we're looking at in terms of fun, revenue to help the autism community and to just keep ourselves afloat. You know what I mean? But our community and our partners and everyone seemed to really stick it together. We've had a lot of success with both our investments in the autism community last year. We did a COVID-19 relief fund, so we were able to get relief very immediately out into the community, be it direct financial support or technology supports for families and schools, or early on it was protective equipment, all that sort. You went through it all, the same deal, right, Mark? So anyways, I think that was that's my highlight of the 3 years, is just the way our community responded over the pandemic year to both help generate funds and really increase our support into the autism community over that time. I would say that's kind of what I'm most proud of. In terms of challenges, it's ongoing, right? I mean, it's the other side of the coin. There's obviously a pandemic success story, but there's from an organizational standpoint, I suppose, but it feels kind of cheap to even say that, because the way the pandemic has impacted people and families affected by autism, as you well know, Mark, has been, very negative in a ton of different ways. You have the regression of skill sets. You have the unemployment. Unemployment was obviously a huge factor for people with autism before the pandemic, but people with autism, they haven't been able to go to work. They've been regressing in their schools. Zoom doesn't work for a large population. Families who were already strapped beforehand, losing their jobs. You've seen it all. But so that's the big challenge now, is how do we, knock on wood, hopefully we're coming out of this pandemic sooner rather than later. How do we rebuild together? That's going to be challenge A moving forward.
I'd like to follow up with that, Nick, a little bit, because I get asked this question all the time, and that is, what is, Crossroads going to look like, post-pandemic, it's a moving target in terms of being able to answer that question. I'm wondering what the pandemic will mean for the Flutie Foundation, and do you see any changes in the foundation in terms of what it does for the autism community and how it does it?
Yeah, I think a few things. I think well, one is, it's a cliche at this point, but the whole being nimble and but we have totally moved towards a more I don't want to say the word nimble, but nimble and responsive way of doing things, and being less red tape in terms of how we invest in the autism community. So, and we were kind of moving in that direction to begin with, but it's sort of, it used to be, okay, an organization wants to work with the Flutie Foundation. Well, okay, our grant cycle is at this time of year, so you call us in August, right? And you still obviously have to have some structures in place and some systems, but at the end of the day, a family whose mother just lost her job and the kid's home, and they're not waiting until August
Yeah.
to get support. So I think that's one thing, is just, being a little more, as best as we can, without, the whole thing falling apart, and, to be responsive to the needs of the community. We've always prided ourselves on that. It's not to suggest we weren't responsive to the needs of the community prior, but just to really have an ear to the ground and be able to act to support the community is one way. And then two is, I really just think moving forward, we're going to have to build, strategic partnerships with all of our partners, our grantees, other organizations that are like-minded. Like, I'm sure it's the same stuff. I read your guys' strategic plan, and so similar. I like some of the things that you're doing, but you have to engage with the community in different and more holistic ways. And so I guess sort of a less transactional approach to our partnerships and a more like deepening of said partnerships would be another thing.
No, that's a really apt description. That's very much appreciated. We here at Crossroads were, I believe, a recipient of what you described a second ago as that flexibility. You mentioned also our strategic plan. Our strategic plan was a recipient of the Flutie capacity building grant that we were awarded by your foundation. So we want to thank you for that.
Oh, no, yeah. No, we're thrilled. No, happy. Looks like you guys, you just released it like a week ago or so, I think.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So I definitely read through it. Looks like you guys have, it looks great. It looks like you got a lot of work ahead of you though, huh?
Yeah. It's a bit ambitious. I think, I think it's very doable, but ambitious nonetheless.
Yeah.
From your perspective, in terms of being, instrumental in the autism community, do you believe our strategic plan to be such that at least some of the components of it are consistent with where the needs of the autism community actually are?
Yeah, I think so. Because, when you think about, you are such a vital part of these families' lives, right? If they're sending their children are going to your school, you're perhaps the number one sort of service provider in their life. So it sounds to me, again, pardon me, I don't know every detail of the, I definitely read every word of the plan, don't get me wrong, but but I'm going to be a little presumptuous here, so just bear with me.
That's
but
okay.
I think the notion of you kind of diversifying the services you provide to these families, and so maybe they're with you now from birth through school into adulthood. It makes it so much easier for families, so they're not having to piecemeal. I mean, there's still any family who has typically developing kids or kids with autism, they're piecemealing their lives together, whether it's this therapy, this sport, this extracurricular, whatever. But the fact that it seems as if you're kind of positioning yourselves to be there throughout different touch points in their lives. So it's like they know, they can call Mark Dumas even after their kid turns 21 and is out into some other different service, or maybe they met Crossroads services prior to the school age because you were doing diagnostic and early intervention sort of stuff, and so it makes that transition that much smoother. So yes, I think what you are outlining there in the strategic plan is consistent with the needs of the autism community.
I'm really happy to hear that. That was our hope and our intention for sure. Hopefully it was well informed and conceived, but it's always nice to hear it from someone like yourself who's in such a pivotal role in terms of the autism community. But for someone who says he didn't own our strategic plan, you actually really most aptly gave it a great description.
Oh, good. I was hoping I interpreted it well. But also, what else I noticed too is, unless you really sit down and invest in doing a full-fledged strategic plan like this, like you might have gotten to goal one. Like I feel like in your day-to-day business, you're always talking with your team about strategy as it relates to your program, right? But the fact that you took the time to plan and think strategically about the other two goals which is the only way goal one is going to work, right? Is if you have, you have a plan for your staff and your people, and then you have a plan for the revenue that's going to support it, the marketing and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's what's often missed when we as organizations, and we're caught up in day to day. It's really hard to set aside the time and the investment, and not even from a financial standpoint, but just the time standpoint to do this sort of stuff. But it's good because it seems like it's comprehensive. You've thought, okay, this is where we want to go programmatically, but in order to get there, we got to get into the nitty gritty of human resource stuff and fundraising and revenue and marketing and all that too. So seems like you got a good plan ahead.
Well, I'm again very happy to hear that coming from you, especially Nick. I really appreciate that. I know Crossroads, the whole community really appreciates hearing that as well. Are there service delivery models right now, from your perspective, that are most in need in terms of in looking at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for individuals with autism?
I mean, yeah, I would just say, well, I mean, if you asked me that pre-pandemic, it's definitely kind of there's both ends of it, right? There's the early diagnostic waiting list things that you always hear about, right? So like, I don't know the current, waiting period, but a lot of families, don't get the diagnosis early enough, or they have to wait to receive the diagnosis. And then, as we all know, the earlier you can get intervention, the more important it is. And then there's obviously the inequity behind all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of statistics out there saying, racially, culturally, linguistically diverse communities wait this much longer to get the diagnosis than, more typical communities, or however you want to phrase it. So that's a thing. But then on the other end is the 21 plus, what happens when you're 21 and out of school, right? While there's never enough funding for any of it, there's certainly more funding for through the school age than there is, and services than there is, 21 plus. So, and those things, the pandemic, I think, has probably just made those things worse, right? And then now there's the regression of skill set that's happened to all ages. And I've talked to a number of parents who are, just like, okay, my kid was here last March, going, maybe didn't have a full-time employment, but, had a place to go, had a part-time job, had an internship, had this, the skill sets were here. And now whoosh, they're way back down again. So throw that in.
No, that's really helpful again, and that's consistent with our understanding of the landscape, and hopefully for us, we're able to be a resource for families and individuals and the like in the coming years. And that's definitely a priority of ours.
Yeah.
A priority for us as well is to continue our partnership with the Flutie Foundation. We think it's really important. We've been, again, recipients of a couple of different grants, one of which, during my time, the capacity building grant, but we hope to continue to partner with the Flutie Foundation.
That would be great. I think we did, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong on this, but maybe we funded you have like the cafe in your school. No, it's at the cafe. It was like a little store where you sell like candy bars and drinks and refreshments, and that's kind of, it's dual purpose, right? One is to sell that stuff, but two is to educate your students on, both working the cash register and how to go in and spend money at a cash register and at a store and all that sort of stuff. I think we funded that room in some way, shape, or form.
Our school store, yes.
Yeah, exactly. The school store.
Which is currently sitting outside of my old office on campus.
Oh, okay.
Yes, exactly.
What has what did you guys do all last year? Like, were you shut down for a while? You went remote. Where are you now in terms of being back / hybrid /
For our school program, we are back fully. We've been back fully in person 5 days a week since February. Between July and February, we transitioned kids from a hybrid model to full-time in-person instruction, which we're very happy doing. All of the work we've done to accomplish that. And we're also extremely happy with the fact that we've been able to mitigate the virus during that time, which is, obviously one of the most important considerations. Our home-based service program was remote for a while, but back in June, we went almost fully in person, and we've continued in that mode since that time. So we're right now mostly an in-person organization, with some remote elements, but mostly in person. One of the things that we had to do in order to accommodate full-time in-person instruction and remain safe and try to mitigate the virus is to use the whole campus building for just school purposes. So during that process of time, we had to move out our administrative functions to another site, which I'm sitting in currently. We're scheduled to move into that site, if not this coming week, the following week.
Oh, okay. So that'll be a permanent thing. Oh, you're scheduled to move back in? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We had to do it primarily for the being able to provide in-person instruction full time. But also there was a side benefit given our strategic plan is to, allow some growth and development of other parts of our organization. So we were able to do two things, essentially kill two birds with one stone.
Sure. Great.
Nick, I want to thank you for your time today. I know it was great for our community to hear from you about you, but also about the Flutie Foundation, its history, and its incredibly important place in the autism community. I really want to thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all the work you do. I mean, our work is sort of, a lot of it's just through our partners that we fund and partner with and provide capacity to, or however it is. So I appreciate you having me on, and we're happy with all the great work you're doing.
Maybe we can do this again sometime in the near future.
Great. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Nick. Bye now.